again, you're listening to This Week with Colm Mungan and Richard Crowley. Children as young as 10 dabbling in drugs, and the most up-to-date figures on the increase in drugs-related deaths, suggesting an 8% increase nationally and a 50% increase in the Dublin area. This was part of the horrifying scenario described in the Dáil during the week by Dublin Central Independent TD Maureen O'Sullivan. The problem is acknowledged now as a national one, but it's particularly acute in the capital, as Deputy O'Sullivan has been telling me.
It's extremely serious, and I see it through I used to chair the North Inner City Drugs Task Force when I was teaching, and I'm back now on the Prevention and Education Subcommittee. So I know from the task force, and I know from the projects who are involved with the task force and from the agencies there, how serious the problem is. And I think part of it is that in the past it was heroin and nothing else, but what we're seeing today is a wide-ranging cocktail of drugs, between the legal ones, the tablets, the tranquilizers, a huge range in the tablet area. We also see cocaine. We've seen a really high strength cannabis that has emerged, which is doing really terrible damage to young people, and you mix all of that in with alcohol, so it's a really lethal mixture. But what happened is the services were all really set up to deal with heroin, so the services are finding it very difficult to keep up with the changing trends in drug addiction.
What's the damage being done to these young people?
There is massive damage being done to young people and to people who have been long time in addiction. And one other aspect to that is in relation to dual diagnosis, and what we see are people with mental health issues, also with addiction issues, and frequently who are homeless, and there's no one-stop shop agency to deal with all three issues. So what you get is people falling between the cracks between the different agencies. And we also have, as you know, a huge problem with homelessness and housing, particularly in Dublin, and there's pressure on the services, the homeless services, to take people off the street. I totally agree with that. But what was happening in some places was they were putting people who are in accommodation who are drug free, and they were putting in that same accommodation people who are actively using drugs. And it was just lethal, and it was very unfair on those people who are in recovery, and they were mixing with people actively using.
What age group are we talking about here, and what reliable numbers do you have on drug-related deaths?
Well, with the drug-related deaths, it takes a while for the statistics to come through. So we're looking at the 2010, 2011. Now, I understand the 2012 will be available soon. But because of the inquest and the coroner's report, it does take time. And I think people do understand that. But certainly from the most recent, which is 2010, 2011, there was a huge increase in the number of deaths in the Dublin area. There's also over 1/3 of the people on methadone in this country are in the Dublin area.
And the age group?
The age group, we do know from people who are working in the area, young people as young as 10 who are dabbling, but they're certainly being used as the runners and as the lookout for those who are dealing in drugs.
The causes?
Why people take drugs, that is a massive issue, and I don't think there's any one answer, but there is a definite proven link between disadvantage and drug use, and we see it rising among those disadvantaged communities. And that's where, when we talk about prevention and education, that the youth projects who are actively working with young people in those areas, because if you come from a better off area, you have access to all sorts of classes after school, but in other areas you don't have that, and it's the youth projects who are providing all of that for young people and who are doing great work on the prevention area, giving alternates to getting involved in drugs, and they've seen almost 40% cut in their funding in the past number of years.
And the shortfall then in treatment services?
Now, the treatment is another one. Back, I think it was the 2007 HSE report about inpatient treatment recommended, I think, an increase of some 350 beds. There has been a decrease. And I think we're down to almost only double figures now on that. And I know people whose sons and daughters died through addiction while they were waiting on that in-treatment service, that detox bed. Because the whole thing with people in addiction is when they are motivated to start the journey to recovery, that's when they need the treatment, not being told, well, you have to wait, we might have a bed in 6 months' time, because some of them are dying before they get that chance. And I would just mention that on Friday I was over in one of the great projects, Silesha it's called, it's in the northwest inner city, and there were about 50 or 60 young men and women all in recovery, and we were presenting certs there to them who are back in education, back in training, and for, I would think, minimal amount of funding, in a sense, that project is working with those who were in addiction, but they have accompanied them on the journey into recovery. And when you see those young people there and the way they spoke about their addiction and the way they spoke about their recovery, I mean, I would love the Taoiseach and various other ministers to come over and to see that and to see what is working.
As you say, various other ministers, because in the past that's been one of the difficulties, is that this area seems to fall under the responsibility of a number of ministers.
Exactly.
Not enough
Not
gets
enough,
done,
not
to be
enough.
fair.
Yes, exactly. And it did go from a full minister, and then it went to junior minister, and all of those junior ministers have other aspects to their portfolio, and it has very much slipped down the agenda. And the other aspect too is that it moved. It started off in the Department of the Taoiseach, and then it went to various departments, and now it's with health. And when you think about drugs, it goes across so many departments, you know, from education to justice to health to social protection. So we need, as I said in the Dáil on Wednesday, if not a full minister, at least a junior minister whose sole remit is drugs.
When you raised it in the Dáil, and you raised it with the Taoiseach on Wednesday, he said, I'll get back to you. What is it you want to hear?
Well, what he did say to me was to furnish him with details. So I will be doing that tomorrow. I have a number of points that I brought out in my leader's question and some other information that I would like to bring to him, and I will do that tomorrow.
And that was TD for Dublin Central, Maureen O'Sullivan.